I'm not a hype guy. By that, I mean I'm not an early adopter. I don't replace my phone just because the next one came out, I don't wait in line for the latest Harry Potter book, and I only started watching Breaking Bad a couple of years after the series finale. What I'm saying is, rather than someone who gets excited about the next big thing, I'm someone who prefers to let the dust settle before I take a good look at what the thing actually is, and form my own opinion without the ambient noise of marketing, instant fan bases, or people like me making videos about how this new thing could solve all your problems. Counterpoint? There's nothing inherently wrong with hype. Advertising might be mostly shallow and dumb, but it does have the main advantage of letting you know what's on the market. And when a new company puts out a new product, I'd really rather they spend their startup cash on making that product really good, rather than paying for a huge marketing campaign. So whipping up a wave of enthusiastic grassroots support is a way more affordable way to get noticed. So I'm not giving hype a hard time, I'm just saying it's not for me. Strymon have been around for 14 years now, and very quickly became a household name in higher-end audio effects, maybe even the ones to beat, which is no mean feat when you consider the size of the market and the heft of some of their direct competition. Initially, for me, buying one was easy to resist for the simple reason that I didn't have a lot of money to spend on equipment, and Strymon pedals, even the smaller ones, are as expensive as you would expect a fully featured, American-made effects unit to be. TC Electronic, to name but one competitor, have a rough equivalent for each of Strymon's pedals for around half the money, and TC make great pedals, so when you're on a budget, that's an easy decision. But over time, I started to notice that when people put a Strymon pedal on their boards, it would stay there. In a lot of cases, we're talking professional musicians, guys who get a lot of this kind of stuff for free, and so basically have their pick. And so whose pedal boards otherwise tend to be a bit of a revolving door. So clearly, Strymon are doing something right. So when this Strymon Timeline came up in a trade, I decided to find out once and for all what it is about it that basically ends so many guitar players' search for a delay pedal. This is my own pedal, the video isn't sponsored by Strymon or by anyone else, so all these opinions are mine. So what does the Timeline do? Well, Strymon describe it as a studio-class stereo delay. It's got 12 types of delay, which you can access via this rotary dial, and then tweak via these knobs that represent the functions typically available on most delays such as time, repeats, and mix. Plus controls to affect modulation, a tone filter, and the amount of signal degradation. It has stereo ins and outs, an expression pedal input, and extensive MIDI capability. If you check the manual, you go on to find that the pedal also has deep editing functions that enable you to, for example, set the roll-off frequency for the tone filter, the bitrate on the lo-fi setting, or the LFO shape on the trem setting. And you can save all of these tweaks as custom presets, which you can access via the foot switches, which also operate a 30-second looper. I'm summarizing really, but these are the pedal's key features. And this deep editing functionality, to me, is the pedal's only real drawback. This 6-digit readout is the only indication of what you're doing when you're editing a preset, and you navigate an extensive list of menus using just these 2 push-button rotaries. And it's all just a little bit tricky and unintuitive. I'm normally quite good at finding my way around these things, but I immediately had to refer to the manual to find the correct sequences of pushes and turns required to make my edits and save a patch. And I still had to start over a few times to get the hang of it. The issue there is that unless I do it all the time, I'm likely to forget that sequence, and next time I want to make a deep change to a preset, I'm gonna have to dig out the manual again. The pedal is self-contained, it doesn't have USB, it doesn't have Bluetooth, so there's no external app that you can use to build or edit patches. The pedal is literally it. Now, if you're a tweaker, then this isn't gonna scare you, but even though I'm not exactly a technophobe, I did find the pedal's interface frustrating. But for reference, this is a TC Electronic alter ego. Look how much bigger it is, and it has half the controls on it. And if you do want to get into deep editing on this, you do need to plug it into a computer. The alter ego is also a great pedal, so what I'm saying is, if you want a big feature set in a small form factor, the compromise is likely to be ease of use. The good news though is you can, if you prefer, dispense with the deep editing altogether and just treat the pedal like a stomp box with 2 presets and a tap tempo. I found it a lot more satisfying to use it in that way. Just select the delay type you want using the rotary, tweak it using these controls here, and then press down on the rotary again to save your patch. Now, you might argue that's a dramatic underuse of this pedal's full potential, but I don't think it is, and here's why. Multi-effects units have had deep editing capabilities and MIDI functionality and expression pedal inputs and stereo routing since the 90s. If you look at any multi-delay pedal on the market right now, and there have got to be at least a half dozen serious contenders, they share all of that functionality and offer basically the same selection of presets. Tap delay, digital, analog, tape, shimmer, reverse, lo-fi, and so on, all with modulations and stereo functions and all that stuff. And as I mentioned before, a few of them are significantly cheaper than this. In a video I made about a year ago, I claimed, some would argue rashly, that I was getting rid of my Valve amp and pedal board full of stomp boxes in favor of a Line 6 Helix. Long story short, a year later the Helix is gone, I have multiple Valve heads and way more stomp boxes than before. Why? Because while it's easy to get sidelined by stuff like functionality, practicality, affordability, and the kind of near infinite tweakability that some modern digital products like the Helix has to offer, where the rubber meets the road, the only thing that really matters is what the thing sounds like when you play it. So, if the Strymon Timeline has become the go-to delay pedal for so many guitarists, maybe, just maybe, it's because it sounds really good. I recorded all the guitars today using my custom Telecaster through a clone, a full-tone OCD, and the Timeline in mono right into the front of my Jet City on the Marshall cab. I tweaked the factory presets a little bit using the default controls, but I didn't do any deep editing. Most other videos I've seen, guys have a dual amp setup with stereo effects, loops, and so on, but some guys just want one amp with everything going in one end, and they need to know what to expect too. And honestly, it sounds so good that if I could only use it like this, I think it would still be well worth the asking price, so all the other stuff it can do is just a bonus. It has analog drive-through, so your bass tone is unaffected by the delay signal. The delays themselves are as precise and sophisticated as you'd expect, but what I really like about them is how much character they have right out of the box. Each delay type feels immediately musical, which is not always the case with delay pedals, especially with stock presets that usually want to showcase the extremes of a pedal's functions rather than give you something you might end up using. And that being said, with other delay pedals I usually find myself turning the delay level down, whereas with the Timeline I found I can open it up a bit because the trails seem like they've been tuned to sit better in a mix. The guitars in the track are pretty wet, and like I said, it's all mono signals, so with a lesser delay you'd expect it to get cluttered, but here it's clear, it's defined, and it sounds great. Am I gonna keep this? Bearing in mind my comments about functionality, if I was just looking for a pedal for my live rig, I'd be inclined to move this on and get one of the smaller pedals like the El Capistan tape delay. But because I do a lot of recording, I know I'll get a lot of use out of the full range of presets the Timeline has to offer. So in conclusion, like I said at the beginning, I'm not a hype guy, but from time to time, you've got to know when to admit that the hype is real. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.